So we got Max Out Monday. Throwing the challenge flag if you're watching any football yesterday. Patricia and the Detroit Lions took down New England Patriots. Big first win for Matt at Detroit, which was awesome to see. And saw him rocking some blue and silver today in their honor. Anyways, what I want to talk to you about is it relates to actually the game in a roundabout way. But long story short, if you've ever seen the movie not Moneyball, Two for the Money, and it had Matthew McConaughey in it, and he's a sports handicapper, and I believe he's in it with Robert De Niro or Al Pacino. I forget which one off the top of my head. But anyways, in the movie, there's a point where he's handicapping a game, and one of his friends bets on the wrong team. So he ends up betting on the Oakland Raiders to beat Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. The funny thing is, this was when John Gruden had just changed from the Raiders to Tampa Bay, and now John Gruden's back in the NFL coaching, and he's back at Oakland. So the funny thing is, Matthew McConaughey gives some free advice to his friend and is like, hey, listen, the Bucs are going to beat the Raiders in the Super Bowl because, and then he goes on like a laundry list of things why John Gruden knows that Tim Brown, or I forget who it was, I think it was Tim Brown, likes to only catch the ball over his right shoulder, and like all these other things that you'd pick up because he coached them before and he knew how they did things and he knew what their strengths were and their weaknesses, and that was a huge piece as to why he knew who was going to do what and why he believed Gruden was going to win with the Bucs over the Raiders, and of course they did. So now to jump that into this weekend, Coach Patricia obviously had coached with the Patriots for 13 years or so, so he knows that team inside and out, and that brings us to one of the things we talked about before, which is called the Tetris effect, or some people call it the Tetris syndrome. And when you're talking about becoming great at something and knowing your skills and knowing your craft and really, really being able to fully take advantage of all the talent and all the skill that you have and or your team has, there's a certain amount of skill and study that you have to like apply, meaning like as it relates to the Tetris effect, there was the research that was done on people who'd been playing the video game Tetris, where they had done so much of it and put so much time in it, even when they're sleeping. It's called a hypnagogic imagery, and that basically it's where you're kind of asleep, you're kind of awake. It's almost like lucid dreaming in a way, and you're kind of hallucinating and you're seeing things and shapes and stuff where it should go based on what you've been paying attention to. So as a football coach, if you've seen one team play a ton and you've done a ton of studying on the teams and things like that, you can see where things fit. You envision that, you can see it out there, you can project it. I think I forget what it's called, but it's it's not virtual reality, but it's where I can't remember it right now, but basically it's where you're putting imagery into reality and you're able to see it. And so the Tetris effect does that. So the funny thing is, with Coach Patricia knowing the Patriots so well, I'm sure he was dreaming of exactly what they're going to be doing and how they're going to take advantage of their strengths versus the Patriots, potential weaknesses and things of that nature. So it's really important when you're really trying to sharpen the saw, when you're really trying to refine your skills and everything, that you understand that putting time in on video study on yourself and also on your upcoming opponent is absolutely imperative to being able to fully express the truest version of your maximum performance. And so there's a lot of people who will say, well, you just got to focus on yourself. Well, you do have to focus on yourself, and you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses and your best transitions to different things. But when you have a particular game, a particular test that you have coming up, it's important to understand how your strengths and weaknesses apply and can transcend into the game against the opponent. So it's important to understand you need to know yourself and then how you fit with the other person, because it's a relationship. The game is a relationship. It's a communication between two different parties. So if nothing else, look at it that way, because we have a lot of people who are like, well, you should just focus on yourself. Don't worry about the opponent. Well, you need to know yourself, but you also need to know how you work together with that opponent. And that's really key. And so in this particular situation, obviously Coach Patricia knows the Lions and he knows the Patriots, obviously even probably better than the Lions at this point, because he's had not as much time to prepare with the Lions. Now, as it relates to what we do, is we call this RNA and DNA. We do an analysis. And it doesn't just mean your RNA and DNA like in your body, but it's in our performance, and we use the acronyms for something different. But in the acronyms, what we do is we look at what you do the best, and then the things that support that, and then the things that we need to do to make sure that we kind of like shore up our downside. And then we take that information and we apply it into your human performance training in your daily life, and then that augments what you're doing. And I think that was what it was called. I was talking about before, like virtual reality. It's augmented reality, where you're taking reality and then you're putting what you want on top of it, like overlaying it, and then you can actually see, kind of superimpose that on it. And I think that is kind of a lot of what the Tetris effect is. When you're watching something and you've seen it for so many years on top of years, and you're looking at something, and like I'll get this blank stare that I have on my face right now, and then you can literally see this part moving over here, and then something that's not even going on over here that you can say, oh, this would work there and that would fit perfectly, and then this would transition to this, and so you're looking at things and you've seen them so much, but then like the creative juices get flowing and you can kind of see where there's opportunities that aren't even there yet because something didn't happen, and then that other reaction didn't happen, but because you've seen it before how that plays out. And you could literally see like that type of stuff happening in the Lions-Patriots game, because Coach Patricia knew that was going to happen. And it's a really important thing to understand those weak spots that you have and your strengths, and then apply it to the current opponent. And that's the way it is in life too. And that's not just in games, but also in practices. You practice that versus your teammates. You practice that when you come in for a training day. You practice that, and you practice that and look at that when you look at your film. And these are all things that are super important. And we're talking about the Tetris effect. And I mentioned the movie Two for the Money. And we talked about Coach Patricia's win with the Lions over the Patriots. And if you think about those three things, it'll help you understand and realize what we use with the RNA, DNA, and that brings that whole thing together. And if you're not using VR stuff right now, or augmented reality, if you're not using like Halo Sport and stuff like that, if you're not using all the different technical tools that are out there, or let's just go even more low tech, if you're not even using video review right now to break things down, you're really missing out. And I'll hear coaches from time to time in high school, sometimes in travel, talk about like, well, we really want to focus on ourselves. We don't want to get carried away with watching and studying the other teams and stuff. Like, okay, chances are if you're saying that, you don't even study yourself. And if you don't know yourself and you can't communicate yourself to somebody else, how do you think you are doing in preparing yourself to be the best version of yourself from a performance standpoint? It's like, you're really missing the boat. It's really like, that's kind of like a club mentality. That's like a recreational mentality. That's not a varsity sports kind of mentality. That's not a championship mentality. That's not a growth mindset. That's not what we call a GOAT mindset, greatest of all time. It's none of those things, okay? So get clear on who you are, what you bring to the table, and then understand your opponent enough to understand the relationship, the communication that's going to transpire during the course of a game, and know what's going to happen.